Let's make this very clear. Let's get this out the way right now. Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, one of the greatest bands of all time. Nick Cave, one of the greatest writers of all time. Undisputed. This catalogue is unmatched. Just hit after hit after hit after hit. Barely any misses. They've dropped so many albums at this point, and it's just ridiculous. So of course I was always going to review this one, okay? And call me biased if you want, because I've just said they're that good. But this is pretty much another great one in their catalogue. What can I say? It's just always like finding those little slight margins to change things up to make it feel different to the next album and to the previous album. It's just so good. Started off in the early days in that kind of more gothic vein, that kind of more bloodlust vein, where the lyrics were way more gory and kind of focused and fixated on death in quite a brutal way, which made the music so interesting and so bizarre at the same time. But then later in the career, they've found a way to just kind of soften things up, just make things way more emotional, and the experiences, the very traumatic experiences that Nick Cave has gone through in his personal life, has just added to such a sad beauty to the music that is really heart-wrenching and so powerful to listen to. That just makes this late career burst from Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds so exceptional, and one of the best examples of a band in the late days of their career, the kind of second half of their career, putting out music as good as the first half. Not many bands can say that. I think Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds have a great argument for being one of the few bands around that are still hitting the heights of their best days in their prime years, which most of the time is the band's, first 5 or 6 albums, something like that. With so many albums in, the quality just hasn't dipped. This album is more rooted in that kind of whimsy sound, the angelic choral sounds that you'd maybe expect if you were just like entering heaven. I was about to say, the kind of like church-like feel of this album, but honestly at times it just sounds so heavenly, so incredible in that kind of way, that it just feels wrong to say anything but that, really. I mean, the opening track with All the King's Horses, Couldn't Put Us Together Again, but the way like their music just kind of transcends and just hits this really incredible crescendo, and the music just sounds so glorious, like absolutely stunning. It really does just feel like you're walking on clouds listening to this. I mean, Nick Cave, not like a technically incredibly good singer, like he's not like on the kind of like level of like a Whitney in that kind of sense. But like I say, the softer late career sounds of their music, you really do begin to appreciate how holy his voice feels. And I think for the kind of album they're going for and the kind of style that they're going for in this album, you couldn't ask for a better voice to do this sound. He really does sound so holy. This is, of course, coming from somebody that personally isn't religious or wasn't brought up around religion at all, really. I think there's a lot of British families nowadays that would say a similar thing. There's far more other countries in the world that are very much invested in religion compared to the UK. That's not to say nobody's religious over here. That's clearly not true. And I'm not here to do the whole Ricky Gervais thing and start telling you how you're stupid to believe whatever you believe. I'm very much okay with the idea of a religion. I think the belief behind it is quite a beautiful thing. But yeah, personally, I'm just saying I'm not particularly religious. But however, I can really appreciate when an album or a sound or a style, that gospel feel, just really strikes me in such a way that this album is doing throughout. It's one reason why I always thought the arguments surrounding Jesus is King by Kanye West were just pointless and stupid, because it's like nobody's hating on Kanye for singing about religious themes or having a gospel sound. It just wasn't done very well. Whereas this is a great example for anybody that would be unashamedly defensive of that album. And you're allowed to like it, of course, but I just think if you're somebody that's really like vehemently against anyone that thinks that's not a good album, I'd implore you to listen to this, because I'll say right now, Nick Cave conveys emotions and those kinds of vibes in a better way than this friggin' Kanye album I'm talking about. Wild God, oh, what a track. Just so joyous, just has this incredibly joyous energy to it. It is really, really powerful, and it's so euphoric. That point in the track where it just lifts, and those backing vocals, it's just so beautiful. Like, this track really takes you aback. The first time I heard it, I was like, oh my God. Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds are out here doing it again. Just unleashing like everything within you out to the world. It just feels like you're just pouring everything out of you all at once. It's such a stunning track. Although I do think that's very much easily the best track on the album, and pretty much one of the best songs of the year, to be honest with you. I will say the Oh Wow track is a really close second, which has some quite funny lyrics where he says, she rises in advance of her panties. Okay, but the actual track itself sounds fantastic. It's got this like way different approach when it comes to like the drum pattern. Like, it's got this kind of like sharp metallic sound in the percussion, which I think is quite interesting. The piano sounds gorgeous on this track too. Just more pensive, kind of slower moving, but Nick Cave just has a really great way of like conveying the emotions in this track, and I think the chorus has this delicate touch to it, which I think is really nice. Horse references galore on this track, on this album. You just keep hitting these tracks that continuously mention horses, which I think again is kind of trying to convey that feeling that this album is going for. I think horses kind of represent that feeling this album gives you, which I think is a pretty cool thing. You've also got frogs though, another animal that's mentioned on this album. Not the same as horses though, but yeah, this track again just feels like Nick Cave is out here singing from the heavens. It just really sounds that beautiful. It's ridiculous, man. Cinnamon Horses being another track as well, by the way, that has the reference to horses on this album. Another beautiful track. I got to mention these lyrics on Final Rescue Attempt, where I find the lyrics on this track, and pretty much on this album, of course, to be pretty beautiful. But my hand searching for your hand, searching for my hand. Pretty simple. Doesn't exactly, give off too much of an abstract feeling. It's just very straight to the point. But I just really love the idea of that, hands searching for one another, never really quite finding each other. A really beautiful way to convey that, I think. And Nick Cave, again, like especially in the late career, has just been so good with words and poetic lyrics. This is just a great example of that again. Conversion, the vocal harmonies on this track just reach incredible levels as well. It just sounds so beautiful. I mean, the way it's just all layered on top of one another, it gets to a point where it feels a bit much. Like, I could definitely feel a point on this album for somebody else that may think this is getting a bit too sappy or maybe too saccharine. I don't want to use those words negatively, because for me personally that isn't how I feel, but I guess I could see somebody feeling that way when you hit tracks like this, where the lush instrumentation and the harmonies just kind of collide in such a sweet way that maybe I could understand that argument to an extent, but for me personally I don't think that's a problem at all. Also, really had to highlight the line where he says touched by the spirit. I mean, this entire album just feels like you as a listener being touched by some kind of spirit. It's really that kind of delicate and approached in such a stunning way. At times it really does feel like he's just stood outside a church and just reeling off parts of the Bible to you. It just kind of gives off that energy. Yeah, I mean, as you can tell, I think this is a great album, of course. The mad thing is that in the context with his discography, I don't even know if it would rank like 8th or 9th or 10th or something. Like, it could be that kind of low in his discography, which sounds like it's not an important one, or it sounds like I'm not calling it a great album. It is just that Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds have so many great albums that it hits a point where you're just splitting hairs. He's got a similar feeling to me for personally like the Mountain Goats, where they've got so many great ones that the top end of their discography is pretty hard to rank, because it's like, well, this is great, and yeah, another band that's very different in their sound, but very similar in how consistent they are and have been for so many years. And Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds just once again have hit it out of the park for me. Just a totally new feeling I'm getting from this album that I haven't got from another album of theirs, and yet it's still really, really enjoyable, beautiful, stunning to listen to, and just offers something different that you would have got from the 90s, you would have got from the 2000s, you would have got from the 2010s. Yeah, just can't really offer many more compliments than that. I'm gonna go 8 out of 10. I think this is great. I think it's one of the best albums of the year for sure. For me personally, maybe some of the tracks kind of bleed into one another towards the end, which is why I wouldn't go higher than this. But they're still really lovely to listen to. They're just harder to separate because the sound of the album starts to get similar, but that's like a really minor complaint. 8 out of 10 from me, as you know if you watch me often. It's a very positive score. This is definitely year-end list worthy, of course. Let me know in the comments what you think of this. Do you agree with me, disagree with me? What's your favourite track? Where does it rank in his catalogue as well? Have a good day and goodbye.